The chemicals that I'm most concerned about, some of the most powerful ones in lowering testosterone and increasing estrogen, by the way, also, they go into the urine because they're water soluble. And so they leave the body very quickly. So they're, we can measure. I can get your urine sample and we can send it off to a lab and then you'll know what's in your body. Good idea, right? Good thing to do.
Which MHI is going to do very soon with the help
with the help of
so
Dr.
stay
Swan,
tuned.
for sure.
Starting with me. You said you promised me.
Yeah, right.
Okay.
Right.
Going first.
So here's a woman, she's being exposed. She's getting these chemicals, which we call phthalates, that make plastic soft and flexible. We'll talk about this some more. Maybe she's getting that through her cosmetics or maybe through her drinking bottle, her water bottle. And so she takes that, she's pregnant. It goes into her bloodstream, it goes into her system, and it goes into the placenta. It crosses the placental barrier and it goes into the fetus. It's very difficult to measure, you can't really measure amniotic fluid without risk to the fetus. So we have to infer what the fetus is exposed to, except in abortuses you can measure. But interestingly, it turns out that we have a marker of how much testosterone there was in that place, and we'll come back to that later.
I think this is the good time to introduce AGD.
Okay.
AGD, yeah.
All right. So we've been talking about how testosterone is necessary for full masculinization of the genital tract, right?
Yes.
We know what we're talking about?
Yes.
Yeah? Okay. So I'm going to be very clear and plain here. It's a distance from the anus to the genitals.
Yes.
Okay. And when you say the anus is pretty clear cut, that's where to measure. The genitals not so clear, and there are a couple of alternatives. But basically, you want to go the whole distance, right?
Which is what you call the taint. Or the gooch.
It's not me that says that.
I've heard
that's scientific
out there. 6 names. I just know the taint. Which one else? Well, you have like 5.
Okay, you ask some young guys on the street, and what the taint is, the gooch and the grundle.
The grundle.
They're talking about this distance, okay? So it's not a secret, just adults don't know about it. Anyway, except us. And now you do too. Anyway, this distance, let's talk about what happens. So here's you know what I mean when I say undifferentiated genital tract? It's just a ridge. You can't tell if it's male or female, right?
Okay.
And that's very, very early in pregnancy. And then when the testosterone starts to be produced, there's a signal to the cells in this, primitive organ to start differentiating. That is, becoming different in males and females. And the way that happens is that the male splits off in a way. So the organ that's going to be the ovary goes off and becomes the testicle, and the organ that's going to be the penis starts growing, and all this stuff starts popping out. And of course, the male genital is exterior. The female genitals are all interior. That means that the male genitals take up a lot more space, more real estate, right?
Yeah.
And for that reason, that distance is longer in males than females. Typically 50 to 100% longer,
50 to 100.
right? So that's a lot, right?
Yeah.
Double, right?
Double, yeah.
And not surprisingly, by the way, that's true of all mammals except hyenas.
Except hyenas. The female have a longer AGD. Interesting.
Wow. All right, nice.
Females are different. You read about female hyenas; they're really interesting. Anyway, so as this is going on, this distance gets longer and longer, and turns out that length is a property that stays with you for your life, like the size of. I have small hands. You have big hands. For our size, we probably had that same ratio from when we were very, very small. And it's the same thing with the AGD. If it's small at birth, for example, it's relative to how big the baby is, then it's going to be small all through his or her life. That's really useful because what it tells us is a lot of things. It tells us what happened in the womb where we can't look, in the black box of the womb. And it tells us what's going to happen in the future. So it's amazing. It's like this Greek god called Janus. I don't know if you ever, you know.
In your book, introduce Janus to me.
So Janus looks to the past and to the future. And so we can look to the past and we can say, here's a boy with a smaller than expected for his size, AGD. So his androgen levels in utero were low. Here's a female with a longer than expected, because it works for females too, a longer than expected AGD for her size. And so she probably had excess testosterone. And by the way, babies born to PCOS mothers who have excess testosterone have longer AGD.
Wow.
Go figure, right?
Go figure.
Okay, so here you are looking at the past, because you can't dive into the womb and measure anything, but you have this indirect measure. And then it turns out that when this AGD is shorter than expected for the boy, when he grows up and starts making sperm, he's going to make fewer sperm. And when he tries to get pregnant, he's going to be less successful. So it's a marker of what happened in utero and a marker of what's going to happen in the future. There's not too many things in the body that do that for you. It's really pretty amazing.
You spoke about a study that you collected urine, that you ended up getting funded for the study, and then you brought in the individuals and their kids and measured their penis and the endogenital distance.
Thank you. I think that's great to talk about. Right. So remember we talked about this study in which we compared sperm in different places in the United States, right? As part of that study, I asked the man, and I actually found the men as partners of pregnant women because they were most representative. Everyone goes to the doctor for pregnancy. So we thought, okay, at least we'll know what our population is. So we got a urine sample from the man, but we also got a urine sample from the woman, just because.
Yes, data.
Data, exactly. And I'm telling these guys they should start collecting urine too.
We are.
Sure. Listen, after you, we learned the value of data. Oh my goodness.
So when I learned about AGD, which was amazing, it was because I found out that in animals, these chemicals that I'd measured, these phthalates that make plastic soft and flexible, actually produce a shorter AGD in males.
Wow.
That was
It's monumental.
Yeah, but first it was in animals, and several years before we did it. And so when I heard this, I thought, well, is it true of humans? Right?
Yeah.
And so to answer that question, I went to those stored urine samples, and those had been pregnant women, so they had children. And I asked them, would you bring your child in so we can measure their HED? And so we did that, and it turned out the measured levels of phthalates in the woman's urine in early pregnancy, first trimester, were related to the baby's
Exposure.
HED.
Wow.
So the urine was related to the exposure, and then it was related to the HED.
Incredible.
So we had a link from the mother's exposure to the child's HED.
How many people were in that study? Do you remember?
It's almost like it was meant to be.
It was about, originally it was something like 900, but then for the sperm. But then when we went to get the children, it was several years later, so we couldn't find them all and they wouldn't all come in. I think in that study maybe it was 500. Yeah. But we did it again. We did it in a whole new study.
But how
TIES.
interesting is this? We're talking about the fifth vital signs. AGD should be something that's measured, because this is what gives you everything that you cannot measure in the womb. So that shows you how much testosterone that this fetus had and turned him into a boy, and the amount of testosterone that the fetus was exposed to will determine the AGD.
Right.
And the importance of the AGD, it's not just that they'll have lower sperm count. It's associated, and we can talk about testicular dysgenesis syndrome, where when you have a longer AGD or when you're exposed to those chemicals at that critical period of time, it comes with a whole host of bad things.
Right.
Decreased sperm count, increased risk of hypospadias, which is where the pee hole is under, undescended testes, testicular cancer, that went up 400% over the last 40 years.
Just 1% per year.
Low testosterone and everything that it brings. So really, you're seeing that this poor boy was exposed at first trimester of pregnancy without any fault of his own, and then now he's 20, 25 years old, and he has all this list of problems. And we can look, everything I just said there, everything incidence is going up. And we can trace that now to the AGD and to the exposure. So I never knew about AGD before reading your book. I ask urologists and OBGYNs about AGD, blank faces. So, but this is great. This is educational. We need to popularize that. And one thing we do a lot with our guys and our, we try to make things easy. Talk about sex, talk about your penis, talk about your genitals. It's okay. This is really something physical that we need to all confront, talk about it, and then help you with solutions. So the AGD for me was something amazing. We actually did a few testing. We use a caliper and to measure it. And you put it, one of the interviews you did after you published the book, you said people were calling you nonstop. They're like, Doc, how long should my AGD be? How do I increase my AGD? How do I do this? They're like, unfortunately, it is determined at birth. Yeah. And it's hard to make the determination per individual.
Right.
Doesn't mean that if you measure yours, you're 3.2 centimeters, you're like, oh, I have this. It's an average, right?
Yeah.
How shorter has it gotten per decade? Do we know or no?
No way to know yet. Yeah, so if we could get men who were 80 and 70 and 60 and 50 and to come in and measure their AGD, we would be able to answer that question.
Great,
but it's very difficult to get like a 80-year-old man to come in and lie down and
show his teeth.
Yeah.
Old school.
Let me show your grumble, Grandpa. No, that's not going to be easy.
To be a little more inclusive, because you touched up on estrogen. A couple of MHI roundtables ago, we had Dr. Anthony J, who wrote Estrogeneration. EDC'S, estrogenic compounds, phthalates, they're all kind of in the same family in terms of the effect on the body. And a lot of the question, your wife was like, wait, hold on a second, I don't get it. If, I'm a female, I'm supposed to have estrogen, these things, multiply my estrogen, how does that affect me? So how does it affect women you've seen on the EDC side? Because, we talked about PCOS and the increase of PCOS. So, how does it affect also on the female side?
Right. So you kind of two questions there. Yeah. If we're just talking about low testosterone, that has an effect on females, and I'll talk about that. But also changes in other hormones like increased estrogen, has impacts as well. Right. PCOS, risk of breast cancer, and so on.
Endometriosis, fibroids, all increasing.
Yeah, it's all governed by your hormones, right? So, but let me just say, the AGD, is going to get, if there's too much testosterone, as I said, the AGD will get longer. And girls who are born who have CAH, a congenital adrenal hyperplasia, which has excess testosterone, they have a longer AGD. But interestingly, there's a whole nother area for testosterone that women are not aware of. We all have testosterone.
Yeah.
And it's important for libido in men and women. And in our study, we asked women about their sexual function. And we asked them about their sexual frequency and their sexual satisfaction. And surprisingly, women who had higher levels of these phthalates that lower testosterone had less sexual satisfaction and less frequency. So it's playing into sexual function and frequency satisfaction in men and women.
Right. Yeah. And you put that in your book. I'm going to keep referencing. There is a sexual slump happening in our country, in our world.
No, it's in our world, because that's another thing that you discuss. It's not a first world country problem. It's a worldwide problem.
And let's do a little recap. What did we learn from our esteemed professor?
Yes.
Right? Yes. Number one, sperm counts are declining. They're declining significantly. 52% over the last 40 years. And we forgot to mention, you did an updated study.
Right,
yes, that's what I was going to ask. Good job.
An updated study where you went, so the first study was 1973 to 2011.
Right.
Then you updated from 2000.
Well, then we did the whole period by updating to 2018.
So you increased it to 2018.
By 7 years. Yeah.
And what were your findings there with the rate of decline?
The rate of decline has increased. And particularly since 2000, we see a rate of decline about 2% per year.
Wow.
Which is pretty alarming.
So it doubled almost in that
time. Although it wasn't that
1.6,
long period. It wasn't, over the whole period, it wasn't doubled. But since 2000, that in those 7 years, it was doubled.
It will be doubled.
This is scary.
Yeah.
Because we're thinking, we're going to be 10 years, 20 years. Because again, the dumping of chemicals in our world is not slowing down. So now, with your studies, we can link exposure to different EDCs, endocrine disrupting chemicals, that caused a shorter AGD, and then all the bad host of diseases that happen. So we learned that. We also learned that testosterone levels are declining.
Let me just say, before we go on to that, I just want to say the first study, most of our data was in Western countries. So it was from North America, Europe, Australia, New Zealand. And we were criticized, by people who said, well, we're just talking about white man and no, we're not. Because what we found out in our follow-up study, when we actually had many more studies from Asia, Africa, and South America, that the problem exists there as well. And very, very similar. So there's no difference. It's a worldwide conclusion now. And everyone should be concerned, not just white men.
Right. And I think for me, as a recap, what I learned, and to kind of tell the viewers, if you're watching this, first, if you're born within this period, right? And you have, we've seen men that everything is great, their labs look great, and they still have these conditions, that it's not just in your head, that you're not imagining this, right? And you didn't do anything wrong, and there are ways that we can help to kind of detoxify the body, and there are tools to help you. I think that's, for me, very helpful, because there's a lot of desperate people out there that they want to understand and they don't understand, right? So that's the first. And the second, for this generation, for guys like you and I, who are trying to have children, this is so important. Or if you're a parent who has a teenager, right? The exposure, right, to plastics and phthalates, and we'll define those, and a host of other things that you could do to curb that, so that your child, or when you're trying to conceive, so you have a better chance of conceiving, and if you have children, that they actually grow up with a better chance of being healthy. Yeah. That's what I took from it. So.
Definitely. What did you take from it, Michael?
It's better to keep going, because I'm not going to take up too much time, because I'll start bringing more stuff up.
So this was great.
Optimizing your health is only a scan away. Select the QR code that fits your profile best, and we look forward to hearing from you at the Medical Health Institute.